The Indiana Fever have added Australian forward and ex-Valkyrie, temporarily ex-Valkyrie, Chloe Bibby to the roster.
The Indiana Fever just made a signing that has fans scratching their heads and wondering what exactly their front office is thinking. They brought in someone who couldn't even crack the starting lineup for Australia's second-string team. And now people are calling it either genius or desperation. The reactions have been absolutely wild.
I don't know how I feel about this one because I do think that Chloe Bibby is not the greatest outcome in the world. I don't think Chloe Bibby's bad by any means. I think Chloe Bibby's a fine player, but I just don't. I don't see her as this game-changing player. I don't see her as a major player in the rotation. They signed her to a 7-day contract. It's not a hardship, which clearly means they're just trying her out. But at least it's a 12th player. That's the positive, is that at least...
Do you think the Indiana Fever made a smart move signing Chloe BBY? Or are they just settling for mediocrity? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.
Last time we saw Chloe Bibby, she dropped 12 points against the Indiana Fever. Wait for it, in her WNBA debut. She shoots over 40% from the field. She shoots over...
So, the Indiana Fever decided to make some waves by signing Chloe BBY to a 7-day contract. And honestly, the reaction has been about as mixed as you'd expect when a team that's supposed to be building around a superstar like Caitlin Clark brings in someone who couldn't even start for Australia's B team. Yes, you heard that right. Not Australia's main national team, but their backup squad. Let's start with the obvious question. Who exactly is Chloe BBY? And why should anyone care? She's a 6 power forward who's been bouncing around professional basketball for a while now. Most recently playing overseas in Spain, she's the kind of player who looks decent on paper, but makes you wonder if there weren't better options available when you actually watch her play.
I don't know if the answer is a 6-foot-tall power forward who didn't start for the Australian national team's B team. I don't know. I don't know if that's the answer. I don't know if it's the answer to sign somebody who couldn't even start for Australia's B team.
The timing of the signing is particularly interesting because it comes at a point where the Fever have been struggling with roster depth issues. They've been running with just 11 players for way too long, which is honestly embarrassing for a professional sports franchise. So, in that sense, signing literally anyone to get to 12 players is an improvement, even if that someone is Chloe BBY. But here's where it gets really sarcastic. The Fever are supposedly building a championship-caliber team around Caitlin Clark, one of the most exciting players in women's basketball, and their big roster move is to sign someone who the Golden State Valkyries cut twice. Let that sink in for a moment. The Valkyries, who aren't exactly known for their championship aspirations, looked at BBY twice and said, no thanks.
Above average for a three-point shooter, and she is 6 feet tall. Now, 6 feet is nothing to write home about, but she does have some length. She is not, 5'6", she's not 5'8", and possibly she could have a screen set for her, get some space, and just knock down.
The most generous way to describe BBY's skill set is that she's a shooter who can grab some rebounds. She's not particularly athletic. She's not going to create her own shot, and she's definitely not going to solve any of the Fever's defensive issues. What she can do is stand in the corner and hopefully hit open threes when Caitlin Clark creates opportunities for her teammates. That brings us to the elephant in the room. Clark is currently dealing with injury issues and missing games. When your entire offensive system is built around one player's ability to create for others, and that player isn't available, what exactly is Chloe BBY supposed to do? Stand around and hope someone else can get her good looks? The math doesn't really add up there. The comparison that keeps getting thrown around is that BBY is like a worse version of Kennedy Burke, which isn't exactly the kind of endorsement that gets fans excited. If you're actively trying to find someone who's a downgrade from a player who wasn't particularly impressive to begin with, you're probably not making the right moves. What's really telling about this whole situation is that BBY was playing for Australia during the Asia Cup, and even there, she was coming off the bench. So we're talking about someone who couldn't crack the starting 5 for a team that wasn't even Australia's top squad. That's not exactly the kind of pedigree that screams championship contributor. The 7-day contract aspect of this signing adds another layer of confusion to the whole thing. The Fever basically brought her into play against the Chicago Sky, since they only have 2 games during that 7-day window, so they're essentially using this as a tryout against Angel Reese and company, which either go really well or really poorly, with no middle ground, from a roster construction standpoint. This signing probably means that players like Michaela Timpson are going to see their minutes disappear completely. Timpson showed some promise in recent games, but apparently the coaching staff thinks a shooter who could make Australia's B team is a better option than developing young talent that's already on the roster. The whole thing reeks of desperation more than strategic planning. It's like the front office realized they needed another body and just grabbed whoever was available, regardless of whether that person actually fits what the team needs. The Fever have serious size issues, defensive problems, and inconsistent scoring outside of Clark, and BBY doesn't really address any of those concerns. What makes this even more frustrating for Fever fans is that this is supposed to be their championship window. Clark is in her second year. She's playing at an elite level when healthy, and the organization should be doing everything possible to surround her with complementary talent that can help win games. Instead, they're signing players who other teams have already decided aren't worth keeping. The business implications of this move are also questionable. The Fever have been selling tickets and generating buzz largely because of Clark's star power and the team's potential. When fans see the organization making moves like this, it sends a message that maybe they're not as serious about winning as they claim to be. That's not exactly the kind of signal you want to send to your paying customers. The overseas resume isn't particularly impressive either. Playing well in Spain is nice, but the level of competition there isn't exactly comparable to what you'll face in the WNBA. It's like being the best player at your local pickup game and thinking you're ready for the NBA. The skill gap is enormous. From a chemistry standpoint, bringing in new players during the middle of the season is always risky. The Fever have been trying to build continuity and establish rotations, and now they're throwing a completely unknown element into the mix. Bai has played maybe 3 WNBA games in her entire career, so nobody really knows how she'll perform under the pressure of professional basketball in America. The competitive landscape of the WNBA makes this signing even more puzzling. Look at what other contending teams are doing. They're making strategic moves to upgrade their rosters with proven talent. Meanwhile, the Fever are signing someone who couldn't even make it in the league previously. It's like they're playing checkers while everyone else is playing chess. The defensive side of the ball is where this signing makes the least sense. The Fever have been struggling to get stops consistently, and adding a player who's not known for her defensive prowess isn't going to help that problem. If anything, it might make things worse by putting another liability on the court that opponents can target. The media coverage around this signing has been telling, too. Most basketball analysts are treating it as a minor roster move rather than something that could impact the team's success. When the experts aren't excited about your signing, that's usually a bad sign. The rebounding argument is probably the strongest case for this signing, since BBY does have decent size and can grab boards, but the Fever already have players who can rebound, so it's not like they're addressing a glaring weakness. They're just adding more of something they already have instead of finding solutions for their actual problems. What's really concerning is that this might be a sign that better players simply don't want to come to Indiana. If the Fever are settling for someone like BBY, it could mean that more established veterans looked at the situation and decided they'd rather play elsewhere. That would be a damning indictment of the organization's ability to attract talent. The social media reaction from fans has been particularly harsh. Twitter and Instagram are full of Fever supporters expressing confusion and disappointment about the move. When your own fan base is questioning your decisions, that's usually not a good sign for front office. The timing with Clark's injury makes this whole thing even more questionable. When your best player is out, you want to sign someone who can help carry the load offensively. BBY isn't that type of player. She's a role player who depends on others to create opportunities for her. So, what exactly is she supposed to do when Clark isn't on the court? The comparison to previous Fever signings is also pretty revealing. When they signed Ari McDonald, at least there was some logic behind it. They needed point guard depth, and McDonald had shown flashes of ability in her limited opportunities. The BBY signing feels more like they just needed a warm body to reach the roster minimum. The locker room dynamics are another consideration that probably hasn't been discussed enough. How do existing players feel when the organization brings in someone who's essentially an unknown quantity? Does it send a message that their jobs aren't secure or that the front office doesn't have confidence in the current roster? The 7-day contract structure does give them an easy out if things don't work out, but also suggests that even the Fever aren't particularly confident in what they're getting. If they really believed in Bibby's ability to contribute, they would have signed her to a longer deal right away. From a fan perspective, this has to be incredibly frustrating. You're watching one of the most exciting players in women's basketball. Your team is getting national attention for the first time in years, and the front office's big move is to sign someone who couldn't make Australia's second team. The expectations and reality are completely misaligned. The financial aspect is also worth considering. Even though it's a 7-day contract, the Fever are still paying money for what amounts to a very expensive tryout. That money could have been used for better scouting, player development, or facility improvements that might have a longer-term impact. The shooting ability is probably the one legitimate positive aspect of the signing. BBY can hit open threes, and in today's basketball, that's a valuable skill. But the WNBA is full of players who can shoot. What separates the good ones from the mediocre ones is everything else they bring to the table. The international experience could be seen as a positive, but it's also worth noting that plenty of players dominate overseas and then struggle to adjust to the WNBA style of play. The pace is different, the athleticism is higher, and the defensive schemes are more sophisticated. There's no guarantee that overseas success translates to WNBA success. What's really telling is that this signing has generated more confusion than excitement among Fever fans. When your own supporters are questioning whether this was the right move, that's usually a sign that it probably wasn't. Good signings generate optimism and hope, not head-scratching and doubt. The roster flexibility aspect is worth considering, though. Having 12 players instead of 11 does give the coaching staff more options, even if those options aren't particularly inspiring. In a long season with potential injuries and fatigue, depth matters, even if that depth is elite. The development aspect of the organization also comes into question with moves like this. Instead of focusing on developing young talent or making strategic additions that fit their system, they're bringing in players who are essentially placeholders. That doesn't suggest a long-term vision for success. The age factor is another consideration. BBY isn't particularly young, so this isn't about developing a prospect for the future. This is supposed to be about adding someone who can contribute right now, which makes the low expectations even more puzzling. The marketing aspect of this signing is also interesting. The Fever have been building momentum and generating buzz around Clark and the team's potential. And then they sign someone that most fans have never heard of. It's not exactly the kind of move that sells tickets or generates excitement. From a coaching perspective, figuring out how to use BBY effectively is going to be a challenge. She's not athletic enough to play multiple positions. She's not skilled enough to create her own offense. And she's not defensive-minded enough to be a specialist on that end. So, what exactly is her role supposed to be? The pressure is going to be enormous for Bibby to prove that she belongs at this level. 7 days isn't a lot of time to make an impression, especially when you're playing for a team with championship aspirations. If she struggles in those 2 games, the criticism is going to be swift and harsh. The salary cap implications are minimal since it's such a short contract, but it does raise questions about the Fever's long-term planning. Are they going to keep cycling through marginal players? Or do they have a real strategy for building a championship roster? The international scouting aspect is worth mentioning too. If the Fever's international scouting led them to Chloe BBY as their top target, that doesn't speak very well for their evaluation process. There are talented players all over the world, and this is what they came up with. The front office accountability issue is something that needs to be addressed as well. When you make questionable moves like this, someone needs to be held responsible if things don't work out. The Fever's management has made some good decisions, but this one feels like a step backward. Ultimately, this signing feels like a band-aid solution to a much bigger problem. The Fever need legitimate talent upgrades, not marginal role players who might be able to contribute in very specific situations. It's the kind of move that suggests they're not really serious about competing at the highest level. The Chloe BBY signing perfectly captures everything wrong with how some WNBA teams approach roster construction. When you're building around a superstar like Caitlin Clark, every move matters, and this one feels like settling for mediocrity. Time will tell if it works out, but expectations should be low. Like and subscribe for more roster analysis.